So let's talk about the exciting world of elections. It's going to be pretty important to a democratic system or a Republican system like ours. So how do our elections work? Well, we got to pick our nominees. Then we're going to select our office holders. Then we got to pressure them to approve whatever sort of policies we want. An example of a way to maybe select options on specific policies would be a referendum, where states are voting voting for or against proposed legislation, and if it passes, boom, it's law. They don't need the legislative branch at that point. So a way for popular sovereignty to exist is to have a referendum on a ballot, and the voters are going to choose whether it is approved or disapproved. An example a lot of times will be, a local sales tax to fund schools or bond projects or these kinds of things that local communities may be in favor of. Typically, they'll be put on referendum. You also see it for constitutional amendments all across the United States on state ballots. You'll see constitutional amendments to redefine marriage as between a man and a woman in that state's constitution. So some states have done that. Texas is one of them. And now our state constitution says that. Initiative would be, in some states, proposed legislation to be voted on, requires a specific number of signatures to be valid and get on the ballot. So it's kind of like a petition. Usually work policy entrepreneurs, people who are heavily invested on these issues, and they can still be voted down. So we're going to look at a few different elections. The first election that we want to look at is the 1800. It'll be President John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson. They're both nominated by their party's elected representatives in Congress, those caucuses back then. And once they were nominated, they really didn't campaign. You kind of had to act like you were reluctant, that you were bigger than this office. You were just filling the desire of the people who wanted you to be represented. So they didn't campaign. They let their state and local organizations promote their cause. And the campaign was really focused on state legislatures because those are the people who were choosing the Electoral College. And if you remember, that's who chooses the president. So it wasn't as democratic in 1800 as it is now. Most newspapers at the time were heavily partisan, and they made no attempt to be objective. We focused on state legislatures. And after many votes in the House, power was finally transferred to Jefferson. It was thrown into the House of Representatives when all of Jefferson's electors also voted for Aaron Burr. And if you remember, at that point, each elector was allowed to cast 2 ballots because you had a vice president and president. Right? And the president would be the person who won, and the runner-up would be named the vice president. So, the first few elections, you had parties that were against each other. One was the president, the other was the vice president. Really dysfunctional. But the result in 1800 was even more dysfunctional because you had a tie vote. And then the Federalist-controlled House, it took 36 attempts before electing Thomas Jefferson. But while as messy as this election was, the really important thing was that we transferred power peacefully between the 2 different political parties. And really, it was the first time that that's happened, that we transferred power peacefully in a democracy in the history of the world. So this is a huge election, and it's important for that reason. Then 1896, it was a bitter fight over economic interests. You had the gold standard being debated, and McKinley versus William Jennings Bryan. That's what was happening here. William Jennings Bryan won the nomination when he was talking about why silver would be a good idea when you get away from the gold standard. McKinley won the election. The Republicans start a party era. This is a critical election. And they became the party of power for the next several decades. Reason that this election was important, McKinley ran a front porch campaign from his home, and he was able to win. William Jennings Bryan kind of ran the first modern campaign, running all over the world or all over the country, trying to win. And then let's talk about 2000. The Florida was small enough, the victory in Florida was small enough to have an automatic recount go into effect. And Bush and Gore differed about which ballot should count, which one should not count. And as a result, there was a lawsuit, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Bush's lead over Gore was less than 0.1%, and the Florida law mandated an automatic recount. Ultimately, the margin of error between Bush and Gore came down to about 537 votes, and the election hinged on whether or not the undervotes, ballots that showed no vote for president, could be examined by a real human being rather than a machine, whether they could be examined by hand. And this legal dispute was brought up, and it turned into a lawsuit, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And they overruled the Florida Supreme Court and said that a recount was legal, that they needed to recount, but they needed to do the same standards, not just in one county, but in all counties. And as a result, they ruled that there was not enough time to recount all the ballots in an orderly fashion. And as a result, they determined that George W. Bush would emerge as the winner. So this was a huge deal.